So because I'm part of a community that has been targeted, I feel a great sense of solidarity with other groups that have felt targeted. At the same time, because I can pass, I find myself to be in a rather interesting place where my community's sense of itself and its vulnerability is variable. It's a very strange place to be. It's hard to get your balance. There are days when you think you're fine, and there are other days when people tell you you're not. While that is a human experience, I don't think there's anything about being a targeted minority that isn't human. You might say it just takes a little more of the stresses and concentrates them. So that's why any of us, I think, can relate to the issues of equality and equity. And that's why when we dig down to the, hopefully, we'll be able to find room for each other. Everybody is able to breathe and thrive in our society. One of the richest places on earth. You would think we'd find a way to share with each other enough so that everybody would have enough. We've gotten so used in our stressed out times to seeing our glass as half empty or 3/4 empty that it's hard for us to look around and realize how very much we actually have to share. One of the things I've noticed is that sometimes the less people have, the more they know how to be generous with it, which is an amazing thing. Because the truth is, if we're all squirrels, you can never have too many acorns, right? But each acorn can grow a whole new tree of acorns, depending on how you use them. I wanted to call this little conversation with you everything you always wanted to know about Jews but were afraid to ask. But that title, I think, has been used and abused so many times that what I've done is create a short but I hope helpful list for you. Questions people ask about Jews and what is anti-Semitism. A couple of different things, some of them article length, one of them a booklet, one of them an op-ed piece. Just a few of them are books, depending on how much you want to know. So just to say a word about where I come from and to give you a concrete example or two about what it means to, as I said in my email earlier to Amy, what does it mean to tolerate difference in a world where we are trying so hard to make sure that we're all treated equally? Have you ever noticed that when mass marketing has its way with you, it's trying to tell you that if you buy, I think it was Adidas that did this ad, if you buy this pair of sneakers, it will allow you to be you. And 50 million other people will buy the same sneakers, and each one will be individual as a result. The truth is we all are part of a mentality where we are safer in the group. Nobody really wants to be separated from the group. I heard a theory once that the reason for that is that the only reason our ancestors in ancient days would have been separated from the group would be to be stoned to death or left behind. So that there's something very deeply buried in what it means to be a human being that tells us it's not safe to be singled out. That's one level of stress about being different in the workplace. Again, it's all on a spectrum. So there's a continuum of differentness. Each one of us is as different from everybody else as it's possible to be. In my tradition, we're told the really cool thing about each human being is that unlike a human king or queen that stamps every single coin with that royal image, and all the coins are exactly the same, the Holy One stamps all of us with the image of the Holy One, and each one of us is entirely unique. So that's a way that my tradition tries to express the idea that we are all absolutely unique and precious, and all absolutely equal. So an example about diversity in the workplace and how when we have it, we'll all win, we'll all succeed, we'll all be equal. A couple of years ago, one of my congregants came to me very distressed. She worked for a large, I believe it was a health insurance corporation in Tigard, I think. And she came to me distressed because her boss had set a meeting to which everybody had to attend this meeting. This was just absolutely a prerequisite for your job. And it was scheduled for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, which is a holy day for Jews. And she went to her boss, and as she told me the story, and said, "How could you do this? You know I'm Jewish. You know this is a holy day. It's right on your calendar." And her boss said to her, "But I went to ask so-and-so who works in the next department. He's Jewish. He said he didn't care." So, one, not all Jews are equal in their observance. It's really tough for any one Jew to speak for all the people. Every Jewish parent I know has been asked, "Oh, you're the only Jewish kid, you have the only Jewish kid in our class. Can you come in and explain Hanukkah?" Jewish parents are used to suddenly having to be experts and speak for all Jewish holidays in a classroom. That's not too stressful. But then when you meet a fellow adult in another setting, you might ask, "You're Jewish? Can you explain to me what's going on in Israel? Can you explain to me that business with Gaza? Can you explain to me what's going on with," well, pick your problem. No, the answer is no. The average American Jew cannot give you an expert analysis of Israeli politics because Jews are not Israelis, right? It's kind of a weird Venn diagram. Many Israelis are Jews. A few Jews are Israelis. It's a very complicated history. Most of all, though, in a workplace where we're all trying to make room for each other, it's very hard for one person to be spot and be the representative for what every person like that person would want in the workplace. That's not just about Jews, that's about any group that we happen to be part of. How would you like to speak for all women? How would you like to speak for all men? So I said to my congregant, "We'll try to do a better job next year when it comes time again to send out all the pamphlets to all the schools and all the workplaces where we try to send them as just a public service announcement. By the way, got a Jew in your workforce? We'll try to help you with that." It's very strange to have the kind of profile that Jews have when we are such an infinitesimal part of the community. Do you have any idea what percentage of residents of the United States are Jewish? 1%? Somewhere between 1 and 2. It's eeny meeny. There's almost no Jews. That's why I'm here. On the off chance that perhaps somebody in this room doesn't know a Jew. Because even though we've been spread pretty thin, and there's a reason for that, up until very recently, for about 2,000 years, we were treated just the way the Romani still are. People who are called gypsies. Jews were just as stateless, just as homeless, just as wandering. And once in a while, we'd set down roots in a place and it would work for a while, but because we didn't have rights, rights were based on your participation in the Christian society of the Middle Ages in Europe. Because we didn't have rights, we could be moved. We could be told you are no longer welcome here. It's not just a Jewish experience. It happened to the Rohingya last year. It's happening to the Uyghurs in China. It happens all the time to minority groups when, for whatever reason, the majority population is convinced by their government that there's something wrong with this minority population. It's one reason why there are so many Jews, or there's at least a few Jews in so many places, because when you get kicked out, you just kind of try to go to the next place, and you go where the wind takes you if you're on a boat. You go where you can hitchhike to if you're on a train. Why is the resulting experience often seen as this thing is teasing me? Why is the resulting experience often seen as a difficulty? Why is it so difficult to be a small minority in a larger group? Why do we all take for granted that it is? Why should it be? What does it take for us to be able to appreciate each other's differences instead of seeing them as some kind of a difference from which we have to back away, which then causes that stress reaction in the person being backed away from because they're being isolated, which usually doesn't work out well. I'll tell you an ironic thing about Jewish history. Jews are a small minority who got a reputation in the late Middle Ages for economic skills. Have you ever heard that? I'd like to tell you why. Jews were not allowed to join guilds. All the guilds in Europe were like unions are today. And I'm a big fan of unions, don't get me wrong. I just want to use the idea that they're gathered around a kind of a skill or trade. So all the guilds were controlled. You could only belong to a guild if you were accepted in, and Jews were not accepted in. So those kinds of making a living were closed to them. Jews were not allowed to hunt. That kind of making a living, if that's what you call it, was closed to them. Because of the laws of how Jews eat, our kosher laws, Jews were held separate from a major source of social support and making a living, which centered around, believe it or not, the pig fat that was used for almost everything in certain places at certain times. Jews actually became geese shepherds. No, shepherds is for sheep. Geese herders? I guess that's what you call it. Geese herds. Goose herds? We got into geese in a big way because that was a kosher animal. But all these things that kind of kept us on the margins of any given society meant that we had to take more chances if we were going to survive. So a very chancy thing to do would be to buy some cargo, put it on a boat, take it to another place and sell it. That's merchant activity. That's early capitalism, I guess you could call it. And don't blame us for that, though. So merchant activity was very, very dangerous. People wouldn't do it if they didn't have to. Do you remember the Life cereal commercial? What is this? I don't want to eat it. Make Mikey eat it, he'll eat anything. He's the Jew, right? He's the one who takes the chance because there's no other way to get breakfast in his case. So Jews would do that. It was a high stress, high risk thing, but it was something they were allowed to do. They started making a living at it, and of course then they were resented because of the living they were making at it. Because Jews were forced into, also another thing that Jews were required to do in certain places was collect taxes because nobody wanted that job because everybody hates you when you're a tax collector. So make the Jews do it. So the Jews are collecting the money. Jews must just care about money. Damn those Jews. I hate those Jews. Here they come to ask for more money. So it becomes a really nasty stereotype. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't in most of these situations. I forget why I got into the story, because I cared so much about giving you the background. But one of the things that's been interesting to me in the work I do in creating bridges between different communities is the extent to which there can sometimes be a lack of awareness among other groups about the stereotypes that Jews carry that have been put on us by other groups, and the fact that we didn't choose them and that we see them as invidious. Right? So it may seem completely praiseworthy to say, I mean, I've heard this, Jews, you want to get a Jewish lawyer, or you want to get a Jewish doctor, or you want to get a Jewish accountant. I heard once, you want to marry a Jew because Jewish husbands don't beat their wives. I also heard once Jews never become alcoholics because they always have sacramental wine on Shabbat, which is what we call our Sabbath. None of those things are true across the board. Not every Jew is any good at those professions. And there are plenty of Jewish alcoholics. And there's plenty of abuse in Jewish families, unfortunately, because we're just like everybody else. The point I wanted to make about how equity is not like everybody getting the same piece of cake comes out of the obvious common sense proposition that we all know that if you're diabetic and I insist on giving you a piece of cake, it will actually hurt you. Right? So it's not enough to say everybody should have access to the same cake. According to Jewish tradition, the only way to honor each person on the planet is to look at them individually and ask, what is the best way of honoring this person's presence given who they are and where they come from? So real equity is in figuring out how each person fits in their own unique way. What are their talents? What do they bring? What are their problems? What do they need? So that each one of us can hold up the piece of the universe which is ours. It's a little bit like if you ever got to play one of those community building games where everybody holds a giant round piece of cloth. Did you ever have to do that? And there's a ball that you have to make go around it. And it's really fun to do, actually, if everybody's paying attention, because you go like that and the next person goes like that. And the ball actually makes its way around the cloth in a really cool way. And if one person drops their piece of cloth, the whole thing goes. None of us is responsible for holding up any more of the world than our piece. But I can't be empowered to do that until you know who I am and how I can best do it. And the same is true for you. Diversity in the workplace, therefore, means not being colorblind and not being religion blind or culture, any of those words, right? We're not really blind. The strengths that we have come from our differentnesses. If we were jigsaw puzzle pieces and we were all shaped the same, it would be a really boring jigsaw. But I've got a piece over there and you've got a piece over here. And if we figure out how they fit together, then we have a strong whole. What that means is that it's not an unfair thing for a diabetic to get a piece of cake that's safe or get a carrot. I don't even know what diabetics eat, but whatever it is that you should have, that's what you should have, and help with your insulin payments too. But it also means that it's not some kind of unfair accommodation when a Jew says, I can't eat that at all, right? Unless there's some kind of problem that somebody has with the fact that there's a Jew there. And again, that's true of any group. It's not an unfair accommodation for each one of us to be nourished in a way that actually is good for us. But as a group, sometimes it's hard for us when somebody seems to be different. And it may even be harder for that individual who's different to not feel somehow different from the rest of the group. And maybe next you're going to stone me to death. And I might never say that out loud, but something in the back of my head might start to react. Am I safe here? They're going to give me crap because I said I can't eat the ham and cheese on a Friday night. So you can't be sensitive to what you don't know. If we're going to succeed, each one of us should feel encouraged when invited to a common effort to say, I'm all in. I just need you to know this thing about me I'm bringing with me. And then one of the questions become, how can that be a strength rather than a weakness in each person? So it's all about how the group determines the group culture around difference. I like to tell my people on a Saturday morning when we're done with prayer, we pray on Friday night and Saturday morning. If you invite me to a party on Friday night, I cannot and I won't be there. Some other Jew in your department might be because they don't care about Friday night, but Friday night at sundown begins the time that's holy to Jews. I know in an unchurched place like Oregon, what does it mean to say a holy time or a holy place? But I believe that I have a pretty good job security because I think that we're all discovering that it's not enough to go to the mall. And it may not even be enough to go hiking. You might actually need a group of people with which to share whatever it is you're feeling in those moments and to give you a language to articulate it. You can't even say I am unless you're talking to someone else who speaks your language and can understand what you mean by it. That's an amazing thought, isn't it? That unless somebody hears you, you can't even say I. So I work out at this place where they keep having happy hours. I love the people I work out with, but they have no idea that whenever they have a happy hour on a Friday night, they're leaving me out. And I'm only 1% of the population, so I can't exactly expect them to learn this. So the best I can probably hope for is that the 16th time that I say to you, I'm really sorry, but you did it again. It's on a Friday night and I can't be there. I need you to be gracious and go, I'm so sorry, I'm stupid. And I will say, you know what? I get it. There's like one Jew. It's really okay. I am not going to start screaming and yelling, because as long as you accept that I don't have to be there, and as long as I accept that it's not something personal, I think we'll be okay. But that's different. That's on our own time. What about when we're all together for something we have to be together to do? How do we not take it personally when somebody else is different? How do we understand that all of us are equally precious and equally needed, and that I will succeed if you can bring all of you to the table? Because each one of us is so different that we don't even know how different we are. So I like to tell my people on Saturday morning, that was the end of the sentence I started 5 minutes ago. I warned you I would do this. I like to tell my people at the end of our prayers, turn to somebody you don't know in the room, say hello. Everybody in this room has a fascinating story. And you're going to love it. You're going to love hearing it. You're going to love getting to know them. So having said that, I'd love if anybody here feels like they actually are willing to ask a question or share a thought.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Eastern Oregon in a very rural culture. And so I had no exposure that I know of to any Jewish families. Holy days, religious experience, any of that. So when I moved to the Willamette Valley, I brought with me all that ignorance. And that's all it was, you know. And so there was a whole group of friends that we used to go out drinking and dancing and having a really good time. And in the midst of a complete, I'm sure, tequila-induced stupor of my own. See, I'm going to use that as an excuse when actually that has nothing to do with it. And I called my girlfriend a Jew to her face. Explain to me why that was hurtful.
Oh, that's a really good question. So does anybody remember Bonanza, that really, really old TV show? You could probably, I mean, it was before you were born, I'm sure. What I remember, I was a little kid. And in one of the early seasons, this family shows up and they're Jewish. And of course, one of the boys falls in love with the daughter, and of course, it doesn't work out. But the sense of this exotic otherness was really, whoa, right? So if only more Jews had a full, firm sense of their exotic otherness, they could wander through life like an exotic prince or princess and feel, interesting. The problem is that if you've been told that you are basically a cockroach by Christian culture for 1,500 years, and when the word Jew has become a bad word, the J word in some circles, Jew them down means bargain for a lower price. So when Jews came to the United States, the first Jews came early, but the larger Jewish migrations as refugees from wars and persecution in Europe occurred in the middle of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s. When the Jews came over, starting in the 1800s, they desperately wanted to get away from that being called a cockroach business, which ended in the Holocaust, or actually didn't end there, but was expressed in that way. And so, I mean, that's, if you're a parent, you'll do anything to get your kid away from that. So because some Jews, even though they didn't look exactly like American WASPs, they could things to accentuate what they had in common. They could dress in a certain way. They could put aside specific eating habits. It's very funny when you think about Jewish food like pastrami on rye, and Jews will make jokes about nobody Jewish uses white bread. There's a whole genre of Jewish jokes that have to do with people learning about Jewish food or Jews trying not to eat Jewish food so they can't be identified. There was a whole spate of nose jobs, trying to look more American. My stepmother used to iron her hair so that it would be straight when she was a teenager. When she was in college, by the way, apparently this was a thing people used to do in college. Your roommate would brush your hair and you for her. And her new roommate, when she was a freshman at Ohio State University, probably in the 60s, she was brushing her hair and she started like touching her head and looking at her hair. And my stepmother said, "What's the matter? Did you find lice in there or something?" And her roommate said, "No, I'm looking for your horns. Were they retractable?" Many people believe Jews have horns. Michelangelo sculpted a statue of Moses that has horns. It comes partly from, there actually is the word in Hebrew for rays of light is similar to a word for like cornucopia or horn. But it also takes a fair amount of understanding that the Catholic Church did a lot of vilification of Jews, a lot of identifying Jews with followers of Satan, and Satan is often depicted as having horns. So the word Jew became such an epithet that many Jews who were trying to Americanize and be accepted like any other resident of the United States of America and believing it was possible, wanted to be called Jewish, or it was softer, or even officially Jewish organizations would call themselves of the Mosaic persuasion, right? Because the word Jew, still for many of my people, especially the older ones, feels a little rough because we know how many people have used it. So I don't think your girlfriend would have held it against you, but when you said it, it probably struck her like a slap because she wasn't expecting it. And see, here's where, if we can have the follow-up, maybe no harm done. Maybe if you don't have to take it too badly that you screwed up, and if she doesn't have to take it too badly because you didn't mean anything by it, maybe it's not the end of the relationship. Maybe it's an opportunity. It's hard because when we're all stressed out and afraid, it's easier to lash out. It's easier to sit in your stress and your anger and your fear. But that's not going to help us get closer.
What we're trying to do at Clackamas County is create a welcoming and inclusive environment among our 1,800 employees. And without a doubt, we probably have Jewish employees that work here. You pointed out an illustration that I'd like to hear your thought on it. You said your workout group would get together on Friday nights, but you couldn't go because of your religious practice. So it sounded like you felt a sense of being excluded. So how is your religious doctrine so rigid that you can't make an exception to maybe go on a Friday night? Or what advice might you give to a Jewish employee that's in a particular work group that are doing things that may occur at a time that is not consistent maybe with a religious, but how do we get it to cut both ways?
Well, I think you have to decide where you're going to expect all your employees to cut both ways. So if we're going to be equal in terms of what we expect of all our employees, then the first thing we need to do is learn about what Friday night at sundown till Saturday night at sundown means for the Jews, right? So what our Sabbath means for us. And so if you're going to ask a Jew to miss some, and remember I said this is a social gathering, it's not something that's required. And if you're going to ask somebody to cut into their Jewish time, then we should be willing to ask Muslims and Christians to also be willing to cut into their time, right? So it's interesting to learn that, look, again, like I said, we're in an unchurched area. This is Oregon. Most people, when you ask them their religious preference, they say none, right? That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean we have a right to disrespect the way somebody chooses to spend their life and where they find their personal integrity, right? So if I want to compare my religious practice to that of the next person, no matter what the next person would say theirs is, and it might be hiking regularly. A lot of people tell me they find their true spirituality in nature. Doesn't mean I don't. As I said, I believe that my religious community just gives me a language to express it with others. No matter what it is that feeds you, doesn't it all deserve to be equally respected? And again, not because we're being nice to each other, because unless you're well fed spiritually, unless you're well respected in every way, then how can I get the best out of you when we're all together and we need to bring our best? So I guess I would say the first thing to understand is that when you're part of a majority, you have no idea what you're asking, right? I share space, my congregation shares space with a Christian church, United Church of Christ. They are a great group of people, very cool. We get along really well. One of the things that's really great about our sharing is that their main sanctuary has no visible marks of Christianity. They're not really into crosses. Once a year, they want to bring in a tree. So a couple of years ago, Reverend Tara, who's my opposite number, my roommate, got in touch with me and said, you know, my group hasn't had a tree in the past, but we want to bring in a tree this year. And I said, okay, but I just want to know if you're willing to work with me on the tree. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, maybe you could find a respectful way to like put a covering in front of it, some kind of screen, something when you're not there. And she said, what are you talking about? That's not a religious symbol. It's just a tree. I mean, even Portland Public Schools knows it's not a religious symbol. It's just a time of year kind of thing. And this was delicious because Reverend Tara, who's a close friend of mine, is a lesbian, and she probably spends a lot of time feeling targeted and misunderstood and feeling part of a small community. And I said, Tara, here's where you get to be part of the oppressive majority community. You have no idea what it means for a Jew to have a Christmas tree imposed in their sacred space. And you will never know. The best you can do is ask and listen and question your assumptions that say, how big a deal can it really be? Because that is the single thing that will keep you from truly creating a sense that all people here are equal. If you already know, you've already judged what a big deal is and what it isn't. And again, you can't ask a Jew or a lesbian or anybody to represent their entire culture. I always ask my Jews, send them to me. I'm the rabbi. I'll give them a little bit more of a sense of what the issue is across the board and what it means historically. So no, I would, part of being a Jew, part of being a minority, is that you learn where it doesn't make sense to insist on equal representation. I'm not going to ask that my friends with whom I work out, come on, they're not my primary community anyway. They're just people I work out with and I happen to be fond of them. I would never ask them to change a date for getting together for happy hour for me. Never. I'm the only Jew. But on the other hand, that way it means I don't have to show up either if I don't feel like it, if they do it on some other day. I have to accept that when I'm in a social event, when I am a very small percentage, it's not going to go my way. And you know what? I don't care. I'm cool with that. It's part of being who I am. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I may be the only person in any given room who cares about what's being served, right, in terms of what I can eat because of my religious practice. And if you tell me that that seems a little too rigid, I'll ask you about your veganism, because that's a religion too. Yes.
So I come from New England. I think my high school is probably 30% Jewish. And so coming out here was a little different. I don't identify as Jewish myself, but it was different. I didn't understand that there was such a difference in the population. And so, I mean, I grew up going to Shabbat at my friend's house on Friday nights with her family from time to time. I've been to Seders and all this stuff. And so it's different culture out here without sort of that piece of it. And so I kind of have two questions. One, can you talk a little bit about like Jewish culture as opposed to Jewish religion? Because I had a lot of folks I grew up with who weren't practicing Jewish, but they were very culturally Jewish. And then secondly, I've been, with all the additional stuff floating through the air around various targeted groups these days, I'm realizing that kind of growing up in that environment in a way made me less aware of some of the regular kind of, you talked about some of them, like someone using the word Jew in a derogatory way, or sort of the Christmas tree being a not super welcome symbol. But can you talk a little bit about some of the other sort of tropes or other things that come up? I don't know how I missed them, but some of them are very surprising to me that I just never saw, I think because, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure why.
I feel you. So one of the confusing things about Jews is that it's a religion and it's a culture and it's a history and it's a people and it's a food and it's a sensibility and it's and. So an ancient, anything that's old enough that it arose before categories it's not really helpful to break it down into categories. I have relatives who live in Israel. They are not at all practicing Jews, but they have a Seder, right? Right? And most of the expressions they use in Hebrew come straight out of the Bible. They don't know that any more than we know where the expressions we use come from. Probably a lot of them are religiously inflected because of all of life was pretty much religio-social cultural. You couldn't separate it out. We still really can't. You may be the most secular person in the world as far as you're concerned in terms of religions with a capital R, but you have something get you out of bed in the morning, and that's a religion. You have something that organizes your thoughts about how you live, your beliefs, if you will. And that's a kind of a religion. It's kind of a faith. Jews who aren't going to synagogue regularly or praying are nevertheless liable to consider themselves practicing their Jewish identity. And maybe that's a more useful word to use for some groups like us, identity. How do you express your identity? And Jews are very clear that all Jews are Jews. The funny part is, there's a tradition that Jews are born of Jews, but you can also convert to Judaism. You can't convert to Italianism, can you? Well, actually, you sort of could. If you moved to Italy and spent 40 years, how long have you been out here? You might be converting to Portlandism or Oregonism to some extent, right? After a while, you kind of feel like you're part of it. You pick up on the rhythms and to the extent that you're invited in, of course. You can become part of it and feel yourself like an expat. You can feel very much at home. So Jews who convert in sometimes are looked at by Jews who were born in as not really being really Jewish all the way back. And Jews who converted will do 23andMe. Hey, I found out I'm really Jewish after all, right? So there's a little bit of that nonsense going on. But just like with adoption, the way you live, the way you were raised, the things that, your culture, it seems to me is much more definitive than your DNA. That's just me. So I'm not sure how many Jews pray regularly, but all Jews think it's probably a really good idea that some Jews pray regularly, right? There's no one monolith of Jewish life or practice. Jews live all over, and all of their practices and all of their cultures are inflected by the local culture. So Ashkenazi Jews have a cuisine that's very European, Eastern European. Sephardi Jews have a cuisine that's more Spanish and Mediterranean. And there are also Jews in India. There are Jews in Yemen that have been there for probably 3,000 years. Not the individual Jew, but as a community. The last Jew in Baghdad died in the 90s, I believe. And I saw an article the other day about the last Jews in Egypt. Jews have had major civil impacts, major groupings in many different cities and many different societies. And they do it in very different ways. That's why you can't ask any one Jew to represent Judaism. But if you really want a sense of Judaism, you have to go ask a rabbi, or you have to check one of the sources I brought for you. Tropes about Jews. You know, it's hard for me because I'm in such a bubble. There's the finance thing. You know, the best way to figure out what the tropes are? Check out the propaganda the Trump administration puts out, right? Hillary Clinton in front of a six-pointed star and piles of money. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Soros, the financier who's done so much good work in Eastern Europe, being pointed out as somebody who's trying to control the world. That brings me to a really important one. People believe that Jews control the banks and the media. If we did, things would be different. I promise you. The coverage of certain things would be very different. But this idea that Jews control the world was actually given great prominence by a forgery called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which, by the way, is one of the most popular books in Japan right now. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is supposedly a recording of a Jewish group of international financiers and power brokers who, in these minutes, are planning how to control the world. It's a Russian forgery by some Russian anti-Semite. And it's a bestseller. Henry Ford had many copies printed and shared them around with all his friends. Philip Roth wrote the book about Lindbergh becoming president. That would be a really good novelistic way of looking at ways Jews are demonized. Really entertaining book as compared to the things I brought you, which are much more fact-based. The idea also of the Jew who's different, one of the things Jews get to hear is, you're cool, you're not like all the rest of them. Right? But that's typical, I think, of any community that's not real well understood and which is seen as different. When it comes down to it, one of the things I discovered in my work with other communities is we all have exactly the same sense that it's all a waste of energy to hold anybody at arm's length. Because as I saw in a marvelous, I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, but on my Twitter feed this morning, there was this marvelous thing from an organization in Israel of Palestinians and Israelis working together for peace in Israel and equal rights. And they did this marvelous visual of an X-ray of the body, the torso of a Palestinian and of an Israeli. And you could see they're absolutely equal. You know, Arab citizen, Jewish citizen. When it comes down to it, we all X-ray the same. So thank you for your time. I hope it was worth your free time for your lunch. And it's almost 1 o'clock, so I'm going to shut up. And thank you very much for having me.